Baltimore and Heritage Fair. That'll be me. I'll be the guy in the corner sucking down the beers during 38 special. Come say hello this weekend and give us a little time here in the summer. We talk a lot of baseball around here, but we're mixing it up, doing some off-season stuff for the NHL, for the NBA, and certainly for the NFL. Haven't done a lot of Ravens this week. We're about to do some right now with a guy that covers the National Football League and has for almost a decade at Omnisport, as well as Sporting News. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Ron_Clements. That's Clements. One of our returning champions. We welcome him back in for a little summer football chat. You know, Ron, we're feeling a little better about ourselves here with the Ravens with the Jeremy Maclin signing. I mean, it was a little bit of a gloom and doom look around here during free agency, losing players, even though they re-signed Brandon Williams. But and then after the draft when they didn't help the offense. But nothing helps an offense like a good wide receiver, right?
This is true. And obviously the biggest knock on Jeremy Maclin throughout his entire career has been being able to stay on the field. But if he can play all 16 games, the Ravens got a legitimate deep threat and one they needed. You know, Mike Wallace has speed, but he's pretty inconsistent. Maclin provides more consistency as a deep threat.
Well, in the case of Flacco and the offense, clearly he's going to take all the heat. He's the dude making the $25 million a year, right?
Well, he's elite.
Well, it depends on who you ask, right? I mean, I think he's elite. I have the shirt, and he and I have had that conversation on numerous occasions, and it usually devolves into comedy. I mean, he does have a hell of a sense of humor about it that maybe an Aaron Rodgers lacks or whatever. But, in the case of him, coming off the injury last year, where the offense was, where the players were, where Steve Smith was in his career, but more than anything, protection for him and a running game is something that just wasn't always there for him last year, even though he stands in the middle of it and would take all the responsibility. A lot of those other pieces need to be better this year for him to be better.
Yeah, and with any team, it all starts up front with the offensive line, and I think losing, I'm going to butcher his name, but Kelechi Osemele.
Close enough. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, he would accept that.
But when he went to Oakland, that was a big loss for that offensive line. Would the Dallas Cowboys have won 3 Super Bowls in the 90s without a dominant offensive line for Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith? Probably not. And same thing with last year's Cowboys team that went 13-3 with Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. Would those two guys have been the top 2 rookies in the NFL without those big guys up front? Probably not. So, as much as I would say offensive linemen outside of left tackle are pretty undervalued in the NFL, they're probably the most important positions on the football field.
Well, they make everybody else look good. If they're bad, your offense will suck. I mean, if you can't run, you can't protect your quarterback. I mean, you could have, Odell Beckham on one side and whoever you want on the other side, right? And it wouldn't matter if you can't run the ball and you're in bad down and distances and your quarterback's getting harassed. You brought up Osemele. Ron, honest to God, dude, I do a lot of radio around here. I talk to a lot of people. You might be the first guy in this offseason or even during last year that brought up, well, don't you think they would have been better if they had a $10 million guard on the other side? Yeah, they probably would have been. And this is one of the criticisms of Ozzie. And whether it's Pernell McPhee going to Chicago or back in the day, Donnell Ellerbe going to Miami or even Arthur Jones, Paul Kruger, Kelechi Osemele. This offseason, it was Ricky Wagner, leaving out the side door. Obviously, the Zach Orr situation, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes, that reared its, brought itself back into the news this week. But no one talks about Osemele. Nobody talks about the guys who leave and who've gotten wealthy. Torrey Smith being another one. In other places, all they do is bitch about Matt Elam. You know what I mean? And Ozzie's made a lot of these, other guys kind of rich, not through his money because he decided to give the money to Yanda instead of to Osemele, and I get that. But, there have been some good football players that have slipped out the side door here in a way that wasn't happening as much when the Ray Lewises and the Ed Reeds were. Matter of fact, Ray Lewis made a lot of money for a lot of guys named Sharper and Hartwell and, Adalis Thomas. All those guys left, and they were never heard from again. But in the case of this modern era, Ozzie gets beaten on about the draft picks, but he's helped a lot of other football teams, right?
He has, and I think one thing that's really overlooked when you look at the best general managers in the NFL is what a great job Bill Belichick does at recognizing when guys still have something left in the tank when he brings in an aging veteran, or if their time's kind of dwindling and he lets them go and it's the right move. other GMs like Ozzie Newsome or Ted Thompson kind of get a pass when they do stuff because they have won Super Bowls. But Newsome and Thompson make plenty of mistakes where I'm sure if you were to go back and just check off every one, there might be more negatives than positives in terms of free agents they let go. And but Thompson and Newsome have each built Super Bowl championship teams, so they're kind of given a pass on that. But and you mentioned Ozzie Newsome's draft pick. Ted Thompson's whiffed on plenty too.
Well, and that being said, they can both go out and win 11 or 12 games this year, and we're all sitting here with the Ravens trying to figure it out. Clearly, the Ravens have done it in this offseason, saying, we need defense, we need the back end of the secondary, we need that to be more solid, and Jimmy Smith, obviously the injury last year cost him, but, it all comes down to Christmas Day and the tackle at the, at the end zone, and, Antonio Brown reaching the arm out was the difference for the Ravens last year. In a year that was an utter failure for the Ravens in a lot of ways, they're still playing late into the day on Christmas Day with a chance to make the playoffs after the secondary was just beaten down by the Des Whites, by the Odell Beckham Jr.'s, by the Tom Brady and what that offense did to the Ravens late in the year last year. Ozzie went all in on the defense this offseason, more so than the offense.
Yeah, and they needed to. Like you said, the secondary was beaten up last year. If the Ravens were hit hardest by, as you know, and your listeners know, the Ravens were hit hardest by injuries last year, maybe more so than any other team. And if they get those guys back, and with the addition of Macklin on the offensive side, it's going to come down to the Steelers and Ravens again in that division. The Browns, while they're going to be a lot better than they were last year, are probably still a six-win team, and I don't think you can ever rely on the Bengals to be clutch late in the season, even though they have won a few division titles here in the past 10 years or so. But it's going to come down to Ravens and Steelers again in that division, and they're clearly, in my opinion, the two best teams in that division, and it's just a matter of a coin flip, whoever wins it. And off the top of my head, I can't remember when the second matchup would be between those two teams. But, the late game or the late season matchup will probably decide the division again.
Ron Clements joining us here from Omnisport. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Ron_Clements. That's CLEMENTS. And, around the rest of the league, we've talked so much, and a couple of teams that stood out. A lot of chatter about Tampa, a lot of chatter about Tennessee, two perennial doormat types that now, after 2 years of having a quarterback at the helm that's a top pick, it feels like Mariota and Winston, these are the two teams, much like last year, I think Oakland was one of those teams everyone was talking about. I think lots of things expected there as surprise teams on the come. It's very obvious some of these teams are scuffling, like the Jets and the Browns and the Niners, that they can't get better. We're always trying to wonder who's going to be the team that takes another step here to become more competitive this year, and a lot of that is about the teams and the divisions they're in, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I think the Titans will definitely win the AFC South. Houston will have a much better defense. I mean, they had the number one defense in the NFL last year without J.J. Watt. They got J.J. Watt back. As long as he and Clowney are healthy and together, that's going to be a dominant defense, probably going to be number one in the NFL again. But the Texans have so many question marks on the offensive side, and Deshaun Watson's going to be the starter on that team by the end of the season, probably midway through the season. But Tennessee, with what they've done on both sides of the ball, that's going to be the AFC South champion. And as far as Tampa, with what the Falcons did last year offensively, with how many weapons they had and the points they put up, that could be Tampa Bay this year. When you add Deshaun Jackson, when you draft the number one tight end in the draft in O.J. Howard, and you get him at 19, which is just a steal, Tampa's offense could be scary good this season. I mean, that's an offense that will probably set franchise records for points scored, if not push some of the NFL offensive single-season records. I am all in on the Tampa Bay offense this year.
Well, you know what? And Mike Smith, my pal's running the defense down there as well, and that took great strides last year. But, hey, that division, Carolina breezes to a Super Bowl and then chokes it away, the year before last. Atlanta, obviously, and enough needs to be said there. New Orleans looks to be the new doormat there, but I don't ever put anything past Drew Brees, although how many more years can he continue to do this? And I think we say the same thing about Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger as well.
That'll probably be the most competitive division in all of football. I don't know if we're going to see a 15-1 or 14-2 team out of that division this year, but I do think you mentioned the Saints is probably the last place team in that division. The Saints could go 8-8 and be fourth place out of 4 in that division, and because it's going to be an uber competitive division, and every team in that division can score almost at will. Drew Brees probably has 2 years left in him before he probably hangs it up as the NFL's all-time leading passer, and they still have weapons. Their problem has always been defense. Tampa Bay, I just mentioned, Atlanta and Carolina have had the NFL's best offenses the last 2 years, so that whole division is going to be good and competitive, and they're going to beat each other up inside the division, but outside the division, they're going to win some games. And like I said, the last place team in that division might be 8-8.
Ron, for you with the Patriots in their offseason, boy, it's really hard. And I know, from casino to casino, up and down the Strip in Vegas, Patriots are it, right? I mean, it's very, very hard to pick against them, to bet against them, and certainly it's hard to criticize their offseason. And I think over the last 15 years of their dominance, they haven't won a whole lot of off seasons. I mean, maybe the Randy Moss thing you could look back on, and a couple acquisitions here and again, but they're never a noisy team in the off season. They were kind of noisy this off season, weren't they?
Yeah, getting Brandon Cooks and some other guys they got, and then their draft. Well, they didn't have a lot of picks. It was a solid draft, and they
don't have a lot of holes to fill, right? They don't need a lot of players around there, right?
No, they don't. And when you've been the most dominant team in football for the last 15 years, you just keep reloading. And I mentioned Belichick's genius, and he doesn't get enough credit as the general manager of that team. I don't think a lot of people realize that he is both coach and GM because it's just, Bill Belichick's such a great coach. He's a great personnel guy. He keeps finding the Chris Longs or Randy Moss, guys at the end of their career who still have something left, and they're contributors. And they go to New England and they get a ring, and then they move on or they retire. And what Belichick's been able to do up there since he took over is just incredible, taking a 6th-round draft pick and turning him into the best quarterback the NFL has ever seen.
He is Ron Clements. You can follow him at Ron_Clements out on Twitter as well as at On The Sport, a sporting news side partner there for all things National Football League. And boy, this is the downtime, right? We have a WNST text service here. It's all brought to you by Coons Florida Security Boulevard. And Ron, I tell people, if that text comes in, it better be baseball, because if it's football-oriented, it's probably bad news, right? But the Ravens this week got sort of a weird thing with the Zach Orr story. He was their best player last year. I mean, position player, kicker notwithstanding, with all due respect to Justin Tucker. He was really amazing in taking a stride forward. We don't see this often. We've seen a couple of players walk away from the game for their protection. I mean, Elvis Gerback walked out of here a number of years ago saying he was just disinterested and didn't want to get hurt anymore, get beaten up anymore. I guess Zach Orr, now that 5 months have passed and his body feels good, and I don't know that his body didn't feel good back in January, and he's a great friend of ours, and we did live shows with him. He's a great person. This is an intriguing possibility for the league and culpability for his health as to whether they're going to let him play football and whether he could be medically cleared by an NFL team doctor, right?
Yeah, it's another example of a player who obviously loves football and doesn't want to give it up. He retired once for medical reasons. He doesn't want to mess up his back and become paralyzed or anything, and that was the right decision. And as much as he might want to play, I mean, Zach, you just gotta be content with walking away, because it's just not worth the risk to possibly being paralyzed and never being able to walk forget about playing football. This is about his ability to just walk on 2 feet. And to risk that to play football, I just don't think is worth it.
All right, man. Well, I hope you have a great summer out there. High hopes here in Baltimore now that the Macklin acquisition is here. I don't think anybody thinks the Ravens are destitute at this point, but I think there is some healthy skepticism around the Ravens, but there's probably healthy skepticism everywhere, right? I mean, in Dallas, are they really going to win 14 games again? In Atlanta, can they bounce back? Can New England do it? I mean, Oakland's got the situation with their quarterback coming back from a heinous injury. So, even the favorites out there, they have to do a little soul-searching here in the offseason.
Yeah, I think the only team that probably doesn't have a lot of doubt going into this season is the aforementioned Patriots. Everyone else, you're looking up at the Patriots and doubting whether or not you can actually overtake them.
Well, it's always easy when you cheat, right? Ron, great having you on,
I'm
man.
not touching that.
Yeah, well, you should now. They are confirmed cheaters. They have been convicted, right? I mean, they really have been. So, as I always say to people here this year, I'm like, 5 years from now, we'll figure out what they did to cheat in the Super Bowl. Whatever that was, there were some tectonic plates under the surface that Belichick. I don't know. Something weird will happen, right?
Maybe so.
See you soon, man. Great having you on. Ron Clements joining us here from Omnisport. You can find him at Ron_Clements out on Twitter as well. Long, hot summer around here on the 4th of July. Hope everybody's enjoying the holiday, the fireworks, the crab cakes, whatever you're into, the beer, the baseball, the Orioles playing on a muggy weekend here in Baltimore. You can find us out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. All the headlines, all the box scores, all of Luke's work, all of our audio stuff there for you. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.